Hey everybody, welcome to our short Excel prep video or help video. I hope it's helpful. I just wanted to go through a few things that I hope will help you run Excel and also see how you can use it more effectively and help us with what we need to do in class. Um, a couple things I just want to talk about, and a lot of these things I know you guys are familiar with and comfortable with, but just real quick, as you look at Excel, you know it's laid out in a grid pattern where you have columns along the top, okay, and they're lettered with alphabetic letters, and then you have numbers showing the rows. So columns and rows, and each location can be referenced by its column and row number. And you'll see right up here in this name box, it calls that cell G15, meaning it's in column G, row 15. Maybe if I'm working on a specific project and I want to call something different than its actual row name, I can just highlight here and name it something, and I'm just going to name this cell Kyle. Okay, and so now this cell is called Kyle. It's no longer called H2. Now you may think, well, what would I name a cell? You might name a cell radius, or you might name a cell angle or distance, or you know, something else that's significant that you would use at some point. And I'll show you how you could use that in just a moment. But know that you can name cells and also recognize that each cell's name, whether it's J2 or Kyle, references a location on Excel, okay? And it references whatever is inside that cell. That cell is just a box to hold lots of different things. And one of the things it might hold is numbers, and another thing it might hold is words. It also might hold dollar signs or a date. Now, let's talk about that, different cell types. Now, different cell types, as I highlight a specific cell, something you'll notice is up here there is this category, okay, that tells us what category that cell is holding. And right now it shows general. If I click the drop down, there's a lot of different options: number, currency, accounting, short date, long date, percentage, and so forth. I'm just going to leave it on general. But I have before made an error in typing where I've typed 9-14 and not meaning to have it recognize it as a date, but Excel thinks it's a date. And then I'm like, I didn't even want to write 914. I wanted to write the number 914. And when I do that, it continues to give me a date. And I've wondered, how do I get rid of this? And if you've ever been in this case, maybe you've even just started over, okay, if it's in such a way that you just can't replace it. Well, one thing you can do if this is happening, then come up to this type box, this formatting box, and just make it general again. And then that number will appear. Okay, so that's one tidbit in Excel that I think is pretty useful as we talk about different cell types. Now, typically as an engineering student, you're going to be using general. You can switch them to number if you'd like. It doesn't really matter, but general works pretty well for us. You know, percentage, fraction, scientific. Okay, these are things you can do, and again, oftentimes Excel will assume something for you, and then you have the option to change it back. Okay, next thing I wanted to talk about how Excel does simple math. So I'm going to write in this cell a number 874. Okay, and we've got 914 in this cell. Let me just fill in a couple other values. And we can do simple math with this. So we can say we can work from a specific cell, and if we want to do math or any sort of function, you start with equals. And that makes Excel think, okay, I'm about to do something mathematical, whether it's a function or just simple math. And I can come up and I can take this cell and I can hit plus this cell. Now, something I want you to notice, it's saying equals Kyle plus I2. And I can also do equals J2 minus K2. Now, one thing that's kind of nice about naming a cell Kyle or naming it radius or whatever it might be is sometimes you can just write out an equation. And let me go ahead and name some of these actually. Something like radius and distance. And I can just be going along and says equals radius plus distance. Oops. And it just calls out those cells and computes the formula for me. So I don't have to think about where is this. I can just think about, well, I want the radius and the distance added together, and you can type it. So that's the benefit to naming a cell. And then again, there's just simple math that you can do. Now, as we've done things, some of you have asked me, how come sometimes we have dollar signs, sometimes we don't? And let me show you why we have dollar signs sometimes. Let's just say we take this entire row and we want to divide each one of those cells in half. Okay, or how would we do that? Well, we'd say equals, and we'll come up to H2, and we're just going to divide it by 2. And we hit enter. And now I can just grab that bottom corner and just drag that over. And I shouldn't have started on the one that was Kyle. So let me just back up really quick. Let me just do it with these 3 over here. So I'm just going to say equals, oh, I renamed all of them. How about I divide these years in half? Okay, so I can say equals this year, divide by 2. I click enter, and I can then drag that pattern. And you can see what it's doing with each one. It's because of how I drug it with that bottom corner, it's picked up on the pattern and said, okay, well, if you want me to drop down a row, I'll take my number from a row that's dropped down. So D4, and I come up to the formula bar. This one's D5 divided by 2. This one's D6 divided by 2. Now, why didn't it work over here? It's because we renamed these cells. So when I say 874 or Kyle divided by 2, it's 473. If I go to pattern that, it's just always Kyle divided by 2. It doesn't know to pattern a cell, and so that's one thing you have to be aware of if you do rename your cells. Something you ought to think about before you jump in and do that. Now let's go ahead. I'm going to get rid of this. Now we talked just briefly about the pattern. What if we say, okay, well, let's take the difference between each year and the current year, which is 2018, and then let's add that difference to 1922. Okay, so we could do that. And let me just type into this cell, which is F2, 2018. And maybe let's just take the difference first. So I'm just going to come in, and again, I want the difference between this cell minus the cell we're talking about. Now, if I just click enter and try and pattern this, let's see what happens. I look at what's happening. It's patterning both of these. Now, I wanted it to remain locked onto 2018. So I'm going to come back to this formula, and I'm going to come up to my formula bar, highlight it. And for the blue cell, I'm going to go to the blue F2, and I'm going to hit F4 on my keyboard. That gives me dollar signs. Now, that says as you pattern, don't move F2. Keep F2 where it's at. Those dollar signs kind of lock it into place. And so let's see what happens if I pattern that. And I just double clicked on that corner really quick. And you can see that it's still F2 minus D6. Okay, so that's just a little tidbit that's useful. There's $2 signs because it's saying, hey, I'll lock onto the column and I'll lock on to the row. So you could also click F4 one more time and just lock on to the row, and you'll find that the result is the same. Okay, because I'm locking onto the row, but both dollar signs lock you onto the column and the row, and sometimes it's beneficial to do only one of those. Okay, so we just barely looked at patterns and absolute referencing. That's what those dollar signs are called, absolute references. We've looked at simple math. Let's look at how we might call out a function. Now, there's lots of functions in Excel, and I showed you and posted to the website this spreadsheet that has a number of different functions. So let's just look at a few of these quickly. Here's the function name, and then here's a column where that function is called out. So absolute value, cosine, sine. Okay, and you can see I've typed equals ABS of some value, negative 100, and here's what it returns. Okay, so it returns the absolute value, returns cosine of the angle. So cosine radians of B21, where B21 is equal to 100. So I call a cell inside of my function, or that value 100. Here's arctangent. Here's the exponent. So again, we're just plugging in random numbers, but this is e raised to the, okay, here's a factorial. Okay, you can just do fact of some number, and it'll give you the factorial of that value. So here's int, just returns the integer portion, so it'll just give me a 1 because it's dropped off all the decimal places. Log base 10, modulus, pi. Pi is probably a pretty important one. You just type equals pi open parenthesis close parenthesis. So again, to do that, you hit equals pi open and close parenthesis, hit enter, and there's your value. And so if we had, for example, what do we see in class today? Equals 18,000 divided by r, which maybe that's going to be 500 times, and then I'm just going to do pi. Okay, and I can get some value. So there's just a couple different ways to plug in different functions. And again, you can look through this and see what they are: square root, sum if. Okay, sum if is kind of a neat one. I didn't really give an example here, but it'll sum certain values if they meet a criterion. Maybe we'll have time to look at that in just a few minutes. Okay, so there's functions. Remember, you hit equals and then type in your function and call out the cells. Here's a couple different examples of functions that ask for more than one thing, and VLOOKUP is one of them. Now, what VLOOKUP is doing is it's saying, hey, here's a couple students in the class. Here's their grade percentage. Now, sort out a grade based off of this table. And so here's this table that says, hey, you're going to get an E if you're at 50%, a D if you're at 60, a C if you're at 70, a B if you're at 80. And we've created a function that we've typed in that says VLOOKUP, or look up on a vertical table what grade this student Bill should have. And so here's this percentage called out first. Next is the table where all of this stuff is defined. And notice we've used absolute references. And then the to value says go to the second column of this box. Okay, this would be the first column. This would be the second column. Hit enter. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Hit enter and it'll sort out 88% and say, oh, 88 falls between 80 and 90, you get a B. Okay, so that's how VLOOKUP works. Oh, and then here's a sum if example. Again, sum if, so sum of red steel. So maybe we have like a table here showing like color and also material type and weight of each one, and here we can add up from different categories. We can say, hey, first off, it's going to say what values do you want to sum, okay? And I grab the entire row, or the entire column, the entire array. And then it's like, okay, well, where's your first criteria? And then I highlight it. It's color. And what are you looking for? I'm looking for red. And I've typed it with double quotes on either side. What's your second criteria? And I highlight it. And that's this grouping of cells. And you say, what do you want? Steel. And it's in double quotes. And it will add up things that have red and steel. So we've got 534 plus 45. That gives you 579. Here's a sum of just one criteria. So we're only looking at greens. So anything green. Green aluminum or green copper. And it's going to add those things up. and gives us 529. So again, just kind of a handy tip for you to use. All right, I know we're going fast, but I want to show you another thing that's kind of neat. Sometimes when you jump into Excel, you'll copy in something from some data source or something, and all of that information will just be in the first row. And I thought I would show you a feature that's in Excel that will separate those things out, and we could use this first column as an example. So this first column, which we've called property ID, it starts with the category FD or SD or ED, and then gives a 5-digit numeric code. And maybe we want columns of just those prefixes and then a column of just the numbers. So how would we do that? Well, first I'm going to just move over everything and create a little bit of space. And then I'm going to highlight that grouping of values, and I'm going to come into data, and on data there is this text to columns button. Okay, click text to columns. You kind of have to work through this menu, and so you can separate things. If they're separated by commas or tabs, use delimited. If it's fixed width, so with spaces between each field, you can do fixed width. Let's jump into this, and I just stuck with delimited, and I'm just going to toggle on space. So it says, what should I look for to separate this into a different column? I'm going to say space. And when I do that, it automatically separates everything that had a space between it. And I could click next. I'm just going to click finish. And it now pulls those values off into the next column. I think that's a really valuable tip that's been beneficial to me and saved me a lot of time and a lot of retyping and re-entering data. The next thing I want to talk to you about with Excel is making it look nice. Excel, so many times, it's very tempting to just punch in a ton of numbers, get your results, and print it off and turn it in. Excel is really confusing unless you can organize your tables in such a way that they make sense. Now, let me just get rid of some of this other stuff that we did earlier, and let's just try and make this table look nice. The first thing I like to do is to get rid of all of these lines, okay, and make it look more like paper space. So I'm just going to do Control A, and I'm going to color the entire background white. The next thing I might do, I can double click on the boundary between columns. Okay, you can kind of see my cursor turn to a line with double arrows, and that will widen it out to the widest text or number that's there. If I wanted to wrap text, I could highlight that and come up and wrap it right there. And then I could keep it on a smaller cell, and it would kind of just bring it down. Okay, so I just hit wrap text, and now it's just made more room for itself. Okay, and all of those are options. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to center this for each one of these. And then I'm going to apply a border. Okay, I want an underline. Next, for some of these, I might center the actual values. I think numbers oftentimes look good centered, where words often look good with right justification. Okay, and so I start to make this table look like it is valid. Okay, I could copy this out, paste it into a document, and maybe in that document it now starts to have a professional look to it. So use borders to help kind of guide you on things. I color cells, but I don't do it too often. Okay, you can get too colorful on your spreadsheet and also make it look unprofessional, but colors do help. So sometimes it's beneficial to color certain rows. If I have lots of data, sometimes I'll even color every other row. And there are quicker ways to do this that I'm not going to take the time to explain right now. But you do something like that, and it makes it a little bit easier to kind of follow across each line if you have lots of information extending across and not get lost. So as you work with this, please take the time to make your spreadsheets look good. And it doesn't take that long. It takes a little bit of tinkering and moving things around, but it's definitely worth it. One other thing I wanted to show you is you can come inside of here, highlight these values, and then you can find over on this editing, there's a sort and filter. Okay, we can sort A to Z on our actual names of owners and somewhat organize this, okay, group SW Hansen with SW Hansen and have it be alphabetical. When I do that, so I highlighted this and clicked sort and filter, it says you want to expand the selection, meaning do you want it to keep the rows with those actual values? And I'm going to say yes. I'm going to keep that toggled on. I don't want to only sort the names and keep everything else the same because the acres do belong to that person. So I expand the selection and I say okay, and you can see what it did. Now it took the coloring with it, so that maybe I need to adjust. But sorting is also a pretty valuable thing. You can sort in terms of alphabetical. You can also sort numerically and grab the bigger value. And so let's go largest to smallest, expand the selection, you bet. Okay, and we can watch it sort out those values. Okay, so that's one thing that's good to look at. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about was inserting charts and tables. Okay, again, you do that from the Insert tab. One of the charts that you'll probably use the very most as an engineering student comes right here from grabbing a scatter plot. And this is because we can punch in X and Y data, look at regression. We can do a lot of different tools based off of these charts. Now, I don't have real great data to use for a scatter plot, but we're going to do it anyway. And I'm going to create just a chart. So again, I went to Insert and then grabbed a scatter plot. And most often it comes out blank. Sometimes Excel will try to predict the data that you're actually trying to plot, and it'll try to grab that data on its own. I like it when it comes out blank. Now, the next thing I want you to do is right-click inside of the box, and you can come down to Select Data. And that's where you add and tell it, hey, this is my X values, these are my Y values. So you click on that, this menu appears. I'm going to click on Add, and here you're able to just choose those. Now, series name, I'm going to type this in. We're going to say this is our Excel chart example. And then my X values for this example are going to be years. And then my Y values, I need to backspace off that equals 1, are going to be the acres. And so this is the year and the acreage that maybe was sold by someone or something like that. And I'm going to click OK, and I see these values appear, and it looks good. Okay, and I have just a simple chart. Now, anytime you work math, you include the units that you worked from, and the same is true with charts. So you're going to always want to come in and say, let's add axes titles. And inside your axes titles, you're going to want to explain the units of what you've created. So in this case, I'm going to say years, and maybe I'll even call it time and say it's in years, but I think years will be sufficient. And then this one I'm going to show as being acres. Okay. And so then all of a sudden this chart has a little bit more meaning, and so when I read off a value, I know the number of acres, I know the year, and it makes sense to me. So it's so easy to make quick and good graphics. It's a little bit more challenging to make them understandable, but that's your challenge and something you need to always consider and think about to make them look professional and well done. I've tried to go fast to get through this information quickly. I hope that it's been beneficial to you. I'm going to stop it now. We'll be working on spreadsheets together in class, so thanks for tuning in.